There comes a moment when something inside her goes silent. Not the silence of pain, but the silence of clarity. She doesn't cry anymore. She doesn't check his energy. She doesn't ask the universe for signs, because her soul already gave her the answer. She waited. She hoped. She held on to the bond that only she could feel. But now, she's letting go. Not to forget him, not to punish him, but because her spirit can't stay in places that delay her destiny. And here's what no one tells him. The moment she stops waiting, the energy flips. Suddenly, he feels the space she once filled. Suddenly, her silence becomes louder than any message. Suddenly, the feminine isn't just a woman he misses. She becomes a mirror he can't escape. Because she was never weak for loving him. But she becomes unstoppable the moment she loves herself more. And now, she's not chasing, she's not hoping, she's walking forward, barefoot, burning, beautiful. And whether he catches up or not, she's done waiting. It doesn't happen with fireworks. It doesn't happen during a fight or a breakdown. It happens in stillness. A moment arrives, and something inside her clicks. No more waiting. No more asking the stars for answers. No more hoping he will come to his senses and finally see her. It's not a decision made in the mind. It's a knowing that rises from the bones. And the feminine says, silently, enough. But it's not the kind of enough that screams. It's the kind that ends karmic loops, the kind that closes energetic contracts, the kind that doesn't require words, revenge, or even goodbyes. Because when she's really done waiting, she doesn't burn bridges. She simply walks away from the fire. Have you ever felt that moment? The moment when you no longer feel the need to be understood by him? When you stop checking your phone for signs? When your energy stops reaching for his and instead returns to your own body? This is not coldness. It's completion. The feminine didn't give up. She grew up. She surrendered the illusion that love must be proven through pain. She stopped sacrificing herself on the altar of potential. She saw the truth, that waiting wasn't patience anymore. It was postponing her own radiance. And this realization doesn't come in a day. It comes after nights of crying in secret, after prayers that felt unanswered, after moments of intuitive knowing, followed by months of spiritual gaslighting. It comes after loving him in ways he couldn't receive, because he hadn't loved himself yet. But the final straw? It's not something he does, it's something she remembers. She remembers who she was before the trauma, before the silence, before the cycle, before the waiting became a habit. And in that remembering, she returns to her body, to her breath, to her mission. She realizes that love was never meant to feel like a waiting room. Love is not a test of endurance. Love is a frequency. And the moment she rises into it, fully, unapologetically, and without grasping, the old connection crumbles. Because she no longer vibrates in lack. And he can feel it. He doesn't know why, but her energy is gone. The thread is still there, but it's no longer tied in need. She still loves him, but from so far within herself, it doesn't depend on his response. And that shift, it terrifies him, because for the first time, her silence isn't an invitation, it's a boundary. For the first time, her absence isn't a tactic, it's truth. She's not pretending, she's not playing spiritual games, she's free. But freedom doesn't mean she didn't care. It means she only cared for herself more. Have you reached that place? That quiet inner doorway? where you know you cannot wait another cycle, another moon, another sign. Have you felt the grief of letting go of something that never really arrived? The ache of leaving a man you still love, not because you want to, but because your soul can't pause any longer? That's sacred grief. That's the feminine's threshold, and once she crosses it, she doesn't return. Because once a woman touches her own divinity again, she can never shrink back into the version of herself who begged. She sees now that waiting kept her in loops, and her body knew it before her mind did. That's why the exhaustion came. That's why the anxiety rose. That's why her heart felt full but caged. Because something divine was trying to break through. And it did, not through a miracle, but through her own decision to release what no longer met her frequency. And this doesn't mean she closes her heart. It means she opens it wider, to life, to truth, to alignment. And if he ever comes back, he won't find the woman he left behind. He'll find a sovereign being who no longer needs to be chosen, because she already chose herself. So ask yourself now, are you still waiting? Or has something inside you quietly let go? Are you still hoping? Or have you remembered that your path continues with or without his awakening? Because the feminine who says enough is not abandoning love. She's returning to real love, the kind that honors her body, her time, her softness, her power. And from that place, if he finds her again, it won't be because she waited. It'll be because her light became so clear, so magnetic, so true, that he finally had no choice but to rise or disappear. Either way, she is already home. At some point, she stops chasing. Not because she gave up on love, but because she finally understood what love isn't. Love is not waiting in emotional limbo. It's not holding your breath for a message that never comes. It's not checking the energy, pulling cards, or begging the sky for clarity. It's presence. And the moment the divine feminine realizes this, her energy changes forever. She becomes the mirror. Because once she stops reaching for him, he is forced to see himself, without her energy softening the reflection. And the truth is, he was never afraid of her love. He was afraid of what her love showed him. It showed him where he was still small, where he still ran, where he still feared his own emotions, his own wounds, his own light. She reflected his potential, but also his resistance. She became the trigger and the medicine. And as long as she chased him, he didn't have to look at himself, because her pursuit filled the silence. Her devotion covered the gaps. But when she stops, the silence becomes deafening. And now, without her energy running toward him, he stands alone, with nothing but his own reflection. This is the moment everything begins to shift, because the feminine, when she lets go of the role of the chaser, steps into her truest power. She becomes the sacred mirror of truth, not as a weapon, but as a frequency. She no longer tries to convince him of the connection. She no longer explains, repeats, or waits. She simply embodies. And her embodiment creates a resonance so strong, he can't ignore it. Not in his dreams, not in his body, not in the echoes that ripple through his chest when he thinks of her. Have you reached that place? Where you no longer need to be seen by him to know that you exist? where your truth is so clear within you that his silence doesn't unbalance you, where you don't need him to awaken because you're too busy rising in your own. This is the space of the mirror, and it's sacred because the mirror doesn't force, it reveals. It reflects what is, not what you wish it to be. And here's the beauty. Once the feminine stops chasing, she creates space for the masculine to choose, not out of guilt, not out of pressure, but from truth. She is no longer the net catching his confusion. She is the horizon calling him higher. But not all will rise, and she knows that now. That's why she holds no resentment, because she's done begging for someone to meet her where she already stands. She understands the law of reflection now. If he cannot see her light, it's because his eyes are still closed, not because her flame has dimmed. So she protects her flame. She turns inward. She tends to her womb, her voice, her mission. She becomes magnetic, not for him, but for truth. And if truth brings him back, she will see him. But not through the eyes of the wounded girl who needed love to feel whole. She'll see him through the lens of her healed self, and she'll ask, is this a reflection of where I am now, or just a memory trying to return? Because not everything that comes back is meant to stay. And she's learned that the hard way, that chasing love creates illusions, but embodying love creates clarity. And clarity reveals everything. So if he returns, confused, humbled, aching, she won't fall at his feet. She'll stand. And in her stillness, he'll feel more truth than in 1,000 apologies. Because she doesn't need explanations now. She needs alignment. She doesn't need promises now. She needs consistency. She doesn't need potential now. She needs presence. This is what happens when the feminine becomes the mirror. The masculine sees himself, and he must decide, break or rise. And here's the sacred twist. She's no longer waiting for the answer, because her life goes on either way. Her path continues, her radiance deepens, her intuition sharpens, her softness returns, but not to be trampled, to be treasured. So let the world call her cold now. Let others say she changed. Because she did. She became who she was always meant to be, not a reflection of someone else's confusion, but a radiant reminder of what it looks like to choose yourself. And in choosing herself, she becomes the mirror that either wakes the masculine or reveals why he was never ready to see her in the first place. How her detachment shakes his awakening. At first, he doesn't notice. The shift is subtle. Her energy used to be everywhere, like background music in his life. A presence he didn't name, but always felt. A warmth he didn't earn, but always received. But now, it's gone. And he can't explain why, but he feels colder, emptier, like something steady was quietly removed from his field. Because the feminine's detachment is not loud. It doesn't announce itself with anger or drama. It arrives like a pause and echoes like a void. And for the masculine who was used to her unconditional energy, the silence is shocking. Because while she chased, he could hide. While she reached, he could resist. While she waited, he could wander. But now, she's no longer extending. She's standing. And for the first time, he has to feel himself without her buffer. That's when the awakening begins. Not when she gives him love, but when she withdraws the love that once carried him through his own avoidance. Because detachment is not rejection, it's revelation. It reveals what he truly built inside himself, and most times, it's not much. He thought he was in control of the dynamic. He thought she would always be there, orbiting his indecision. He thought her love was eternal, no matter how little he showed up, but her detachment proves otherwise. It shows him the weight she used to carry. It exposes how much of her energy he depended on, even without realizing. And it shakes him, because now he has to face himself. Have you ever noticed how he starts popping back into your thoughts the moment you let go? How he shows up in dreams again? How he texts you just when you've stopped hoping he will? That's not coincidence. That's the energetic thread reacting to your release. He feels it. Maybe not with full consciousness, but something in him is stirred. Something says, she's no longer waiting. And suddenly everything shifts. He doesn't feel the safety he once took for granted. He doesn't feel her forgiveness vibrating in the background. He doesn't feel the pull that kept him attached even when he couldn't commit. And instead of relief, he feels fear. Because the feminine's detachment doesn't punish him. It reveals to him who he is without her. And the contrast is brutal. When she loved him, he felt bigger. Now that she's gone, he sees the emptiness he kept avoiding. And this isn't about ego. This is soul territory. Her release triggers his mirror. It shakes the illusion that she'll always be there. It breaks the comfort he used to silence his own growth. And now, he stands where she once stood, in the space between longing and transformation. Except this time, she's not rushing in to rescue him. She's not holding the space anymore. She's not checking the energy, interpreting the signs, or keeping the flame alive. She's focused inward. And in that detachment, something powerful is born. He must choose. Awaken or disappear. And that choice is no longer hers to influence. It's his to face alone. So what does he do when her silence becomes his mirror? When her peace makes his chaos louder? When her joy without him makes him question the life he built? That's when the real awakening begins. Not when he wins her back, but when he realizes he lost something sacred because he feared becoming sacred himself. But now, it's not about guilt. It's about alignment. The feminine is no longer emotionally invested in when or how he awakens. She's returned to her own field. And that act, that invisible sacred detachment, is what finally presses against his resistance. Because the feminine, when she detaches, doesn't close her heart. She expands beyond the relationship. She becomes her own timeline. And the masculine, who once had time, space, and infinite chances, now feels the pressure of her evolution. Not because she's angry, but because she's not looking back. So if you're feeling that moment, that sacred distance, don't doubt it. Don't shrink. Don't go back to chasing just because he starts feeling your absence. Let him feel it. Let the silence speak. Let your stillness become his turning point. Because sometimes the feminine's greatest impact on the masculine's awakening is the moment she stops trying to awaken him at all. No one talks about the rage. The soft-spoken, spiritual feminine is expected to be gentle, to hold compassion, to understand his wounds, to be patient while he figures it out. But beneath the layers of grace she's worn for too long, something else has awakened. Not bitterness, not hatred, but a sacred rage. The kind of rage that comes from lifetimes of being silenced, of being the healer, the muse, the placeholder, while he ran from his reflection, of being told to wait, to forgive, to stay open. She did wait, she did forgive, she did stay open. And still, he chose his fear over her love. Still, he chose the safe over the sacred, the numb over the intimate, the known over the soul. So now, something inside her is done, and it burns, not to destroy, but to purify. Because this rage is not unspiritual, it's divine fire. It's the heat that melts the last illusions, the flame that consumes the versions of her that kept begging for breadcrumbs, hoping he'd one day see her. Have you felt it? That fire in your belly when you remember how much you gave? The ache in your heart when you realize he never chose you, not fully? The shaking in your hands when you admit, I was too soft with someone who wasn't ready for my light? That's not shame, that's truth. And truth, when ignored for too long, becomes sacred rage. But this rage doesn't scream. It simmers, it strengthens. It begins to move through your blood like a forgotten force. Not to seek revenge, but to reclaim your voice, your worth, your power. And in this space, she becomes untouchable. Because the woman who has faced her own fire and survived it no longer fears the absence of a man. She no longer ties her worth to being received. She no longer waters herself down for the comfort of someone unready. Instead, she channels her rage into silence, into sovereignty, into sacred stillness that does not chase. And that silence? It's louder than any scream, because now she doesn't need to be heard by him. She hears herself. She doesn't need him to admit what he did. She already felt it in her bones. And in this silence, something even deeper awakens, her power. Not the kind of power that dominates or punishes, but the kind that no longer flinches. The kind that knows, if you can't meet me in this light, then this light is not for you. And she says it without apology. Because when sacred rage is integrated, it becomes discernment. And discernment is the feminine's true sword. She cuts through illusions with her knowing. She ends cycles not with anger, but with clarity. She stops explaining, justifying, or waiting. She simply becomes what cannot be denied. And from that place, she watches him crumble, not because she wished for it, but because the version of him that survived on her energy no longer exists in her new vibration. And if he wants to meet her again, he must rise. He must burn in his own mirror, the way she did. He must face what she already transmuted, his fear, his cowardice, his avoidance, his pattern of almost loving. Because she's not available for almost anymore. She's not available for men who admire her from afar but don't dare to stand beside her. She's not available for fantasies of love that never ground into truth. And that fire, that's her boundary now. She wears it in her spine, in her eyes, in her walk. And while the world might call her too much, she knows the truth. She's exactly enough for the love that's real. So if you're feeling the fire, don't suppress it. Don't shame yourself for the rage that rises. Ask yourself, what is this fire here to burn away? What is it trying to protect? Where have I been too quiet for too long? Because sacred rage is not a mistake, it's a signal. It says, your body is tired of waiting. Your soul is tired of explaining. Your heart is tired of holding space for someone who refuses to step in. And now, the space is closing. Not because she hates him, but because she finally loves herself more. And from that love, the kind born in fire, she rises. She doesn't need him to rise with her. But if he ever does, it will be because he, too, felt the flame and chose to become it. Why her freedom is the masculine's real test. She thought the final test would be hers. She believed she was the one being tested by the universe for her patience, her faith, her love. That if she just waited long enough, loved hard enough, held steady in her light, he would arrive. But now, she knows the truth. The final test is his. Because the feminine has already crossed her fire. She's already faced the mirror. She's already purged the illusions of waiting, of hoping, of chasing someone who wasn't ready to be met in the full light of truth. And now, she's free. Not emotionally bound, not energetically clinging, not spiritually negotiating. She's free because she finally chose herself, fully, radically, lovingly. And this is where everything changes. Because her freedom is not just a shift in her path, it's the real test of the divine masculine. When she was waiting, he had the upper hand. When she was chasing, he could avoid. When she kept the thread alive with her devotion, he didn't have to claim his part. But now that she's no longer available, now that her energy is no longer accessible, now that she's detached with peace, not resentment, he must face himself. And for the first time, there's no feminine presence softening the blow. There's no one else to blame, no one else to distract, no excuse to hide behind. Because her freedom has removed the mirrors. She is no longer reflecting his light back to him. She is embodying it for herself. And now, he must choose. Will he rise to meet her in truth? Or will he let the last door close? This is the moment he feels what she felt all along. The ache of presence not returned. The pull of love not chosen. The regret of silence where there should have been courage. But it doesn't unfold all at once. It begins slowly, a dream of her face that lingers too long. A memory that pierces the numbness he once used to protect himself. A subtle grief when he hears her name and realizes he's no longer welcome in her world, because freedom for the feminine is not about rejecting love. It's about refusing to settle for almost. And when she reaches this point, her vibration becomes so clear, so high, so self-sourced, that only truth can match it. And if he isn't truth, he cannot access her anymore. He may still love her, he may still ache for her, but he will not reach her. Because she no longer responds to the version of him that isn't rooted in real embodiment. So now the question is his. Will he do what she did? Will he face his mirror alone? Will he sit with the grief of his own avoidance? Will he meet his pain without needing her to carry it? This is the masculine's real awakening. Not in chasing her, but in becoming what she always saw in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. And that path is brutal. Because the feminine gave him light, and now that light is gone. Not because she hates him, but because she reclaimed it. And he is left with one truth. She doesn't need him anymore. She may still love him. She may still hold space in her heart. But she's no longer waiting for him to awaken. She is walking ahead. And if he wants to catch up, it won't be through words, apologies, or promises. It will be through action, through integrity, through actual transformation. Have you felt this shift? Have you reached that inner freedom that no longer seeks, but simply is? That state where your love still exists, but it no longer bends. Where you would welcome him only if he comes as the man, not the memory. This is your liberation. And it is also his greatest lesson, because the masculine doesn't truly awaken from being chased. He awakens when the feminine is no longer there to rescue him from himself. He awakens in the space her freedom creates. And what he does with that space, that's his real test. But your role now is not to monitor his progress. It's to honor your own. To walk forward without turning back every few steps. To trust that if he is meant to find you again, he will rise to the level of your light. Not try to pull you back into the shadows of delay. Because the love you gave him wasn't lost. It was planted. And one day, he will feel it bloom inside his chest. And he'll realize it wasn't her love that failed him. It was his fear that failed her. And by then, she may already be gone. Not in bitterness, but in truth. Because real love doesn't wait forever. It expands. And now that she's free, she's not looking back. There was a time she waited, not just with her calendar, but with her soul. She waited in her breath, in her womb, in her silence. Every heartbeat a question, every moon cycle a longing, every sign a flicker of hope that maybe this is the moment he chooses her. But that version of her, she's gone. Because the waiting didn't stretch her, it shrank her, it dulled her glow. It chained her gifts to a timeline that was never hers to control. And now, something irreversible has shifted. She is no longer looking to be chosen. She is the choice, not because of ego, not because of anger, but because she finally remembered who she is, beyond the ache, beyond the story, beyond the twin flame fantasy. She remembered the truth. Her soul came here to rise. And love, real love, would never ask her to pause that rise just to be seen. So now, she's not checking the energy anymore. She's not watching the stars for his next move. She's not interpreting his silence as a test of devotion. Because her own heart has become her compass. And it's pointing forward. Not toward another person, but toward herself. And in that return, something sacred is happening. She's glowing again, but not the glow of being in love. The glow of being in alignment. She walks differently now. Her eyes carry something he's never seen before, not because it wasn't there, but because he never looked closely enough. Now, it's undeniable. Her silence isn't uncertainty, it's power. Her stillness isn't waiting, it's presence. Her softness isn't weakness, it's weaponry, refined by fire, sharpened by release. And when she smiles now, it's not for his comfort, it's for her joy. Because she's tasted the freedom that comes from letting go of timelines, outcomes, and emotional labor. She's tasted her own essence, and it's enough. More than enough. Have you reached that place? where the longing has dissolved into clarity, where the ache no longer owns your nervous system, where the story of someday no longer holds your light hostage? Because if you have, you're not alone. Thousands of divine feminines are rising right now, together, quietly, powerfully, no longer in circles of sorrow, but in spirals of sovereignty. They're not asking, will he come back? They're asking, what am I building in the meantime? Who am I becoming while I stop chasing what's not chasing me? What if this entire path was never about union, but about embodiment? Because the truth is, the union you craved wasn't about two bodies. It was about alignment with your highest self. And now that you've returned to her, everything changes. Even if he wakes up tomorrow, even if he comes running back, even if he finally says all the words you once begged to hear, you won't be the same woman he left. You won't hand him your peace just because he's ready now. You won't twist yourself back into the version he remembered, because the version he remembers waited. The woman you are now rises. She rises through her body, through her truth, through the sacred no she speaks when energy doesn't match, through the way she creates without needing to be witnessed, through the way she walks away without drama, just completion. This is not the feminine who bends. This is the feminine who builds, who weaves new timelines from her own soil, who births new worlds with her breath, who blesses him in silence, but no longer burns her essence just to keep him warm. And maybe he'll rise, maybe he won't. But that's no longer your center, because you're no longer circling him. You're standing at the center of your own universe. And the feminine who stands in her center, she doesn't wait. She expands, she doesn't plead, she attracts, she doesn't chase, she magnetizes. So here's your final reminder. You don't need closure to close the chapter. You don't need his apology to forgive yourself. You don't need him to awaken for your light to shine. You are already walking the path. You are already on your way. And from this point forward, your rise is no longer dependent on him. It's in your hands now. And your hands? They were always meant to build something holy, not around the idea of him coming back, but around the truth of who you are becoming. So let him feel the shift. Let him hear your silence. Let him watch you bloom in a garden he chose not to water. Because this time, you're not waiting, you're rising, and nothing can stop you now.